Picture this. You're standing on the coast of Italy, staring at a 2,000-year-old chunk of concrete sticking out of the ocean. It's been slammed by waves, salt, and storms for 2,000 years straight, and it's not falling apart. It's actually getting stronger. Meanwhile, the sidewalk outside your house, poured just 20 years ago, already has cracks running through it like a spiderweb. Here's the part that should completely mess with your head. We don't fully know how they did it. Not 100%. Some of the smartest engineers and chemists on the planet have spent decades trying to crack this one recipe from a civilization that didn't have computers, didn't have power tools, and didn't even have the periodic table. And they still built something better than what we build today. So stay with me here, because this is just the appetizer. By the end of this video, you're going to find out about technologies so advanced, so weirdly effective, that entire fields of science have had to admit, we lost the instructions. Stay till the end, because the last one on this list is so strange that historians still argue about whether it should even be possible. It will completely change how you think about ancient people. Because here's the myth we need to smash right now. You've probably grown up thinking about history like a staircase. Cavemen at the bottom, us at the top, everybody in between just slowly climbing upward, getting smarter, getting better, 1 century at a time. Simple, comforting, and completely wrong. The truth is messier and way more interesting. Human knowledge doesn't always climb. Sometimes it spikes. A group of people in one specific place, at one specific time, figures out something incredible. And then it just vanishes. War happens. Empires collapse. The one guy who knew the secret dies without writing it down, or the person he taught it to dies in a plague, or the library holding the instructions burns to the ground. And just like that, humanity takes a step backward and has to relearn things centuries later, sometimes using worse methods than the ones we already had. Let's start with that Roman concrete, because it's the perfect entry point into this whole rabbit hole. Imagine you're a Roman engineer around 2,000 years ago, and your boss tells you, we need a harbor wall. It has to sit in salt water permanently. It cannot crumble. Today, if you dumped modern concrete straight into the ocean and left it there, salt water would eat it alive within decades. The metal reinforcement inside would rust, expand, and crack the whole structure from the inside out. That's actually happening right now to bridges and piers all over the world. But the Romans didn't have steel reinforcement. They had something almost like a chemistry trick. They mixed volcanic ash with lime and seawater, and something bizarre happened at a molecular level. Instead of the seawater slowly destroying the material, it actually reacted with rare minerals inside the mixture and grew new crystals over time, crystals that filled in cracks as they formed. Their concrete didn't just resist the ocean, it used the ocean as an ingredient to repair itself. For centuries, engineers just assumed the Romans got lucky, or that ancient concrete was actually kind of primitive, and we'd simply move past it with modern materials. Then scientists started drilling into 2,000-year-old Roman harbors and realized these structures were, in some ways, outperforming buildings poured last year. It wasn't luck. It was a formula refined by trial and error over generations of builders that modern chemistry is only now starting to reverse engineer piece by piece. And we still haven't nailed the exact combination they used, because the process depended on specific volcanic rock from specific regions of Italy, mixed in ratios that were probably passed down as apprentice knowledge, not written formulas. When the Roman Empire fell apart, that chain of apprentices broke. The knowledge didn't get destroyed in one dramatic fire. It just quietly stopped being passed down, generation by generation, until nobody remembered how anymore. Now here's where it gets even weirder, because concrete is just the beginning. Let's talk about a sword. Imagine you're a soldier around the year 1100, and word starts spreading through your army about a blade coming out of the Middle East. They call it Damascus steel, and the stories about it sound almost like myths. Supposedly, this blade could hold an edge so sharp it could slice through a silk scarf floating in mid-air. Supposedly, it could cut straight through a European sword without chipping. And if you looked closely at the metal itself, you'd see something no other sword had: a rippling, wavy pattern running through the steel, almost like flowing water frozen in metal. European blacksmiths tried to copy it for hundreds of years. They failed. Over and over. They could make strong swords, they could make sharp swords, but nobody could recreate that exact combination of flexibility and hardness. The ability to bend without snapping and hold an edge without chipping. Then, sometime in the 1700s, the secret just disappeared. The trade route that supplied the raw metal ore from India dried up, and along with it, the specific impurities in that ore, trace elements that turned out to be critical to the whole process, vanished from the blacksmith's materials. Generations of smiths had been perfecting a formula without fully understanding why it worked. When the ingredient disappeared, so did the sword. It wasn't until modern researchers used electron microscopes, tools these ancient smiths obviously never had, that we discovered something wild. Inside genuine Damascus steel blades, scientists found carbon nanotubes. Nanotubes, a structure so small and so advanced that we didn't even have the technology to detect it until the 2000s, sitting inside a sword forged by hand nearly 1,000 years earlier. These blacksmiths weren't doing science the way we understand it today. They were doing thousands of trial and error batches, generation after generation, slowly tuning a process by feel and instinct until they accidentally created something that borders on modern nanotechnology. And then it was gone. Are you starting to see the pattern here? This isn't a story about primitive people. It's a story about incredibly sharp human minds working with limited tools, stumbling into discoveries so specific and so fragile that losing one ingredient, one teacher, one trade route was enough to erase it completely. Let's go somewhere even stranger now. Imagine you're a sailor in the Byzantine navy around the year 670. An enemy fleet is closing in on your ships. And then your commanders unleash something that must have looked like actual sorcery. Streams of fire shooting out of tubes mounted on the ship's bow, fire that lands on the water and keeps burning. Water doesn't put it out. In fact, some accounts describe the fire seeming to burn even harder when it touched the sea. This was Greek fire, and for centuries it was basically the Byzantine Empire's secret weapon, its nuclear deterrent. Enemy fleets were terrified of it. And the Byzantines guarded the formula so intensely, treating it as one of the most closely held state secrets in their entire empire, that only a tiny handful of people ever knew the full recipe at any given time. Here's the wild part. That secrecy worked too well. The formula was passed down through such a narrow chain of trusted hands that when the Byzantine Empire eventually collapsed under invasion and political chaos, the people who knew the recipe died, fled, or simply lost the chain of transmission. And the formula for Greek fire was lost. Completely. To this day, historians and chemists still argue and experiment trying to guess the ingredients. We have some educated theories, probably a mixture involving naphtha, pine resin, and quicklime, but nobody has ever perfectly recreated the weapon that terrified navies for hundreds of years. Imagine inventing one of the most feared weapons in the ancient world and being so secretive about it that you accidentally erase it from human knowledge forever. Now let's shrink things down and get personal, because not every lost technology is about war or giant harbors. Some are impossibly delicate. Think about a violin. If you've ever heard a real Stradivarius played live, people describe the sound as almost otherworldly, warmer, richer, more alive than modern violins built with far more advanced tools and materials. These instruments were made by one family, the Stradivari, in Italy in the late 1600s and early 1700s. And for 300 years, violin makers with access to modern science, computer modeling, and every material known to humanity have tried to match that sound. They haven't fully succeeded. For a long time, people assumed it was pure craftsmanship, an old master's secret technique with wood carving. But recent research points to something almost accidental. Antonio Stradivari happened to be building his violins during a period of unusually cold weather in Europe, sometimes called the Little Ice Age. That cold climate caused the trees he used for wood to grow more slowly and more densely than normal, giving the wood unique acoustic properties that are incredibly hard to replicate today. On top of that, the specific chemical treatment he used to preserve and varnish the wood, whatever exact mixture it was, seems to have subtly changed the wood's resonance in ways scientists are still trying to fully map out using CT scans and acoustic analysis. Stradivari didn't write down his exact formula. He didn't know he was combining a rare weather pattern with a specific chemical treatment to create something historically unmatched. He was just an incredibly skilled craftsman doing his best work, using the materials in front of him. And when he died, so did the exact conditions that made his violins one of a kind. Let's zoom back out to something even older and even stranger, something that still gives archaeologists chills. Imagine divers off the coast of a small Greek island in the year 1901, searching an ancient shipwreck for treasure, expecting gold and pottery. Instead, they pull up a corroded lump of bronze, so unremarkable looking that it almost got tossed aside. It sat in a museum drawer for years before anyone realized what they were actually looking at. Inside that lump of corroded metal was an incredibly complex system of gears, dozens of them, interlocking with a precision that experts initially assumed had to be a mistake or a much more modern object that had somehow ended up mixed in with ancient artifacts. But it wasn't modern. It was over 2,000 years old. This device, now called the Antikythera mechanism, turned out to be a mechanical computer, an actual analog computer built by the ancient Greeks, capable of predicting the movements of the sun, the moon, and the planets, tracking eclipses years in advance, and even keeping count of the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. To put this in perspective, nothing even close to this level of gear-based mechanical complexity shows up again in the historical record for over 1,000 years. We essentially had to reinvent this level of engineering from scratch during the European Renaissance, more than a millennium later. Whoever built the Antikythera mechanism had knowledge of astronomy and mechanical engineering that was so far ahead of its time that when the device was lost, likely in a shipwreck during transport, an entire branch of human technological understanding sank with it. We only know it existed because of a lucky discovery by divers looking for something else entirely. So here's the question worth sitting with. If a device this advanced could exist, get lost at sea, and then disappear from human knowledge for over 1,000 years, what else did we lose that never got pulled up from a shipwreck? What knowledge sank, burned, or simply died with the one person who understood it, never to resurface at all? That thought should be a little unsettling, and it should also be strangely hopeful. Because here's the powerful part, the thing all of these stories have in common. Every single one of these lost technologies wasn't magic. It wasn't handed down by aliens, and it wasn't some mystical ancient wisdom we're too modern and arrogant to understand. It was regular humans, doing what humans have always done best. Relentlessly experimenting, failing, adjusting, and slowly, painfully, figuring things out through trial and error, generation after generation, until they landed on something extraordinary. The tragedy isn't that ancient people were somehow smarter than us. It's that knowledge is fragile. It doesn't automatically pass itself down. It survives only when someone teaches it to someone else. When it gets written down, when the chain never breaks. Empires fall, trade routes dry up, masters die without apprentices. And just like that, centuries of trial and error, an entire hard-won piece of human ingenuity can vanish in a single generation. And that's really the wow moment to walk away with. We like to imagine history as a straight line, always improving, always moving forward. But it's not a straight line at all. It's a fragile thread, held together by people passing knowledge to other people, one generation at a time. Break that thread, even once, and brilliance can disappear as if it never existed. So the next time you look at something ancient, a crumbling stone wall, an old sword in a museum case, a strange metal lump behind glass, don't think primitive. Think about a person exactly as clever, as curious, and as capable as you are, who figured something out that we still can't fully explain today. And ask yourself the real question this video is really about. What are we building right now in our own time that some future civilization will dig up thousands of years from now? And wonder how on earth we ever knew how to make it.